Imagine your stomach cramping from hunger. Your family hasn't eaten in 3 days. Then you spot it, a rotting carcass, maggots crawling through the meat. You don't hesitate. You dive in. While you're reading this surrounded by modern comfort, your ancestors 200,000 years ago were making life or death food decisions that would shock you today. But this is just the beginning. In the Olduvai Gorge, Tanzania, 1.8 million years ago, our ancestors faced a harsh reality. They weren't the strongest predators. Lions, hyenas, and leopards dominated the landscape. These apex predators could take down zebras, wildebeest, and even young elephants with ease. But early humans had something else: intelligence and desperation. When predators finished with their kills, our ancestors moved in. They weren't just picking at scraps. They were strategic scavengers who understood something crucial that other animals missed. What was their secret weapon? The African savanna was brutal. Temperatures reached 110 degrees during the day, dropping to near freezing at night. Water sources were scarce and heavily guarded by crocodiles and territorial hippos. Plant foods were seasonal at best. Most of the year, the landscape was brown and barren. In this environment, missing a meal didn't mean being hungry. It meant your children might die. It meant you might not have the energy to escape the next predator. Every calorie counted in ways we can't imagine today. Hyenas had already torn apart the zebra carcass. The meat was gone, flies buzzing over what remained. The smell would make modern humans vomit, sweet decay mixed with the metallic scent of dried blood. But our ancestors saw opportunity where others saw death. They grabbed rocks and began smashing the bones. The first crack revealed pink marrow, glistening with fat. Inside was liquid fat, more calories per gram than any plant food they could find. This bone marrow was their liquid gold. One large leg bone could provide 1,200 calories, enough energy for an entire day of survival. But accessing marrow required innovation. Different bones needed different approaches. Leg bones were thick and strong, requiring heavy hammerstones and precise strikes. Our ancestors learned to hit at specific angles where the bone was weakest. Too hard and you'd shatter everything, mixing marrow with bone splinters. Too soft and you'd waste precious energy. They developed a technique of scoring the bone first with sharp flakes, creating weak points for targeted strikes. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, paleoanthropologist at Stanford University, explains that early humans were primarily scavengers before they became hunters. The evidence is clear in the fossil record. Cut marks on ancient bones show systematic processing. These weren't random scratches. They followed anatomical lines, showing deep knowledge of animal anatomy. Our ancestors knew exactly which bones contained the most marrow. They developed specific tools for different bones. Thin, sharp stones for cutting through joints, heavy hammer stones for cracking open thick femurs, pointed tools for extracting marrow from narrow spaces. The nutritional payoff was enormous. Bone marrow is 85% fat, mostly monounsaturated, the same heart-healthy fats in olive oil. It contains vitamin A for vision, vitamin K2 for bone health, iron for blood production, and compounds that reduce inflammation. Modern research shows bone marrow contains stem cells that aid in tissue repair. Our ancestors couldn't know the science, but they knew eating marrow made them feel stronger, heal faster, and think clearer. What looks like desperate scavenging was actually sophisticated survival strategy. They learned to read vulture patterns to find fresh kills. Circling birds meant death below. The number of vultures indicated carcass size. Their flight patterns showed how fresh the kill was. Lazy circles meant plenty of meat left. Frantic diving meant competition from other scavengers. Our ancestors became experts at this aerial intelligence gathering. Today we throw away food that's past its best-by date. Our ancestors would have considered that perfectly fresh. They understood that slightly decomposed meat wasn't dangerous if you knew what to look for. The smell told them everything. Sweet rot meant safe to eat. Ammonia smell meant toxic. They knew that meat aged in heat was dangerous, but meat aged in cold was often safer than fresh. This knowledge meant the difference between life and death. They also understood that different organs spoiled at different rates. Liver and kidneys went bad quickly in heat. Muscle meat lasted longer. Fat lasted longest. They'd eat organs immediately, dry muscle meat for later, and save fat for times of real desperation. Every part had its timeline, and wasting any of it could mean starvation later. But marrow wasn't their only unconventional food source. Picture this. You're desperately hungry and someone offers you a bowl of writhing termites. If that makes your skin crawl, you're not alone. But for 6 million years, insects were humanity's most reliable protein source. Unlike large game that could disappear for weeks, insects were always available if you knew where to look. Under every rock, inside every rotting log, in the bark of trees, insects thrived. It's literally written in our DNA. We have specific genes for digesting chitin, the material that makes up insect exoskeletons. These genes are more developed in humans than in any other primate. We also have enhanced genes for processing insect proteins and fats. No other mammal has these genes as developed as humans do. This genetic evidence proves insect eating wasn't occasional. It was central to our evolution. Fossilized human feces, called coprolites, from sites across Africa show remains of beetles, termites, and grasshoppers. The preservation is so good that scientists can identify specific species. They found that early humans preferred certain insects at certain times of year. June beetle larvae in spring, grasshoppers in late summer, termite alates during the rains. This wasn't random bug eating, it was scheduled harvesting based on deep ecological knowledge. Our closest relatives, chimpanzees, still spend hours each day fishing for termites with sticks. But humans took this further. We learned to track termite swarms, knowing exactly when billions of protein-rich insects would emerge after the rains. Some African cultures still maintain this knowledge. They can predict termite emergences within days, sometimes hours. When the swarms come, entire villages mobilize. Children, adults, elders, everyone gathers these flying protein nuggets. The nutritional profile of insects is staggering. One handful of termites contains more protein than a similar amount of beef. But that's just the beginning. Termites are rich in B vitamins, essential for energy metabolism. They contain iron in forms more absorbable than plant sources. They provide zinc for immune function, magnesium for muscle health, and even small amounts of vitamin B12, usually only found in animal products, plus healthy fats including omega-3s and omega-6s in perfect balance. In Thailand today, fried locusts sell for $15 per pound. That's more expensive than most steaks in American supermarkets. What we call exotic was once everyday survival food. Our ancestors didn't just eat insects randomly. They knew which species were most nutritious. Flying termites during mating season were prizes worth fighting over. These alates were 38% fat, perfect for energy storage. Grasshoppers in the morning when they moved slowly from cold. Cricket species that fed on certain plants tasted better and were more nutritious. They developed sophisticated harvesting techniques. For termites, they'd place bark strips near mounds, returning later to collect insects that gathered underneath. For grasshoppers, they drive them into pits or water where they couldn't escape. Some groups learned to smoke out bee larvae, getting both protein and honey. They'd harvest ant pupae, called insect caviar today, which burst with fatty goodness. But here's what's really shocking. At every prehistoric campsite, archaeologists find the same thing. Skulls, cracked open, always in the same pattern. The first few discoveries were dismissed as ritual behavior, but as evidence accumulated from hundreds of sites across continents and time periods, the truth became undeniable. Our ancestors weren't just eating brains by accident, they were actively hunting for them. The evidence is disturbing, but undeniable. Cut marks show they used stone tools to carefully remove the scalp. These weren't haphazard cuts. They followed specific patterns, avoiding damage to the brain tissue below. Then they'd crack the skull at its weakest points, the temple regions and the base where the spinal cord enters. They knew exactly where to strike for clean access. Inside was the most nutrient-dense food available in nature. Brain tissue is unique in the animal kingdom. It's 60% fat, mostly in forms crucial for neural development. DHA, an omega-3 fatty acid, makes up 40% of brain fat. This exact compound is what allows neurons to transmit signals efficiently. EPA, another omega-3, reduces inflammation and supports mood regulation. Arachidonic acid and omega-6 is essential for infant brain development. These aren't just nutrients. They're the building blocks of consciousness itself. It's no coincidence that human brain size doubled during the same period we see evidence of brain consumption, from 400 cubic centimeters to 1,400 cubic centimeters in just 2 million years. That's evolutionary light speed. The pattern is unmistakable, says Professor James Chen from Harvard. Early humans were systematically targeting neural tissue across Africa, Europe, and Asia. Every culture, every continent, same behavior. This wasn't cultural transmission, this was biological necessity. The same omega-3s we buy in expensive supplements today, our ancestors got fresh from their source. A single antelope brain provided more DHA than a month of fish oil pills. But it wasn't just nutrition. Eating brains carried huge risks. Prion diseases like Kuru could kill entire family groups. Parasites thrived in neural tissue. Bacterial infections were common. Yet they did it anyway. That tells us how desperate they were for these specific nutrients. Without them, their children's brains couldn't develop properly. It was worth risking death for the next generation's intelligence. They developed safety protocols we can see in the archaeological record. Brains were eaten fresh, never stored. They used specific tools only for brain extraction, separate from other butchering implements. Some sites show evidence of cooking brains in skull bowls, possibly to reduce disease risk. This wasn't mindless consumption. It was calculated risk-taking for maximum benefit. And then came the ultimate survival test. Winter in Ice Age Europe presented the ultimate challenge. Imagine temperatures 40 degrees below zero, snow 20 feet deep, no plants for 1,000 miles, no insects, rivers frozen solid. Game animals either migrated south or died. What do you eat when there's literally nothing left? The archaeological record shows increasingly desperate measures that would shock modern sensibilities. First, they ate the leather from their clothing. We know this from tooth wear patterns on human remains. Microscopic analysis shows repetitive chewing motions consistent with softening hide. Boiled animal skin could provide some calories. The collagen would break down into gelatin, offering protein. They'd scrape hair off with stones, then boil the hide for hours until it became edible. One leather garment could keep a person alive for days. Then they ground up bones to make flour, not just marrow extraction, but actually pulverizing entire bones into powder. Sites in Eastern Europe show grinding stones caked with bone residue. Mixed with water, it made a paste that could keep you alive another day. The calcium and minerals were crucial when no other sources existed. They even ground antlers, hooves, and horn sheaths. Anything with calories became food. Plant materials we'd never consider edible became desperate standbys. They ate pine bark, specifically the inner cambium layer. This required stripping outer bark, then carefully peeling the cream-colored inner layer. It tastes like turpentine but contains carbohydrates and vitamin C. They learned to pound it into flour, mix with bone meal, and cook into a bitter but life-sustaining gruel. Native Americans later perfected this technique, but the origins go back to the Paleolithic. Finally, they turned to something that breaks every modern taboo. At Herxheim, Germany, archaeologists found evidence that makes them uncomfortable to discuss. Human bones with cut marks identical to those on animal bones. Not ritual cannibalism, survival cannibalism. The bones tell a clear story. These people died from starvation first. The cut marks came after. Their bodies were processed exactly like animal carcasses, systematically, efficiently, with no ceremonial treatment. The marks show systematic butchering, long bones cracked for marrow, skulls open for brains, even finger bones split for their tiny portions of fat. They were extracting every possible calorie. Nothing was wasted. This wasn't murder. These were people who had already died from cold or starvation. Their sacrifice kept others alive through the worst winters. Isotope analysis of the bones shows periods of severe malnutrition before death. These were desperate times requiring desperate measures. Genetic evidence shows population bottlenecks where humans almost went extinct. During the worst glacial periods, global human population may have dropped below 10,000 individuals. The survivors were those willing to do anything to live. Those with moral qualms about survival cannibalism didn't pass on their genes. This behavior happened rarely, only in the most extreme circumstances. But it happened, and it worked. Everything changed when humans discovered fire's true power, not just for warmth or protection, but for unlocking hidden calories in plants. This discovery ranks with tool use and language in human evolution. Before fire, our ancestors were limited to foods their stomachs could digest raw. After fire, the entire plant kingdom became a potential meal. This wasn't a single discovery, but thousands of experiments over millions of years. Before fire, raw tubers were mostly indigestible fiber. Our stomachs couldn't break down the complex starches. A raw potato is 20% resistant starch that passes through undigested. Cooking breaks these resistant starches into simple sugars our bodies can absorb. Suddenly, foods that were worthless became valuable. Wild yams, cattail roots, Jerusalem artichokes, burdock, groundnut, all became edible once cooked. Each plant required different cooking methods discovered through trial and error. But cooking did more than release calories. It killed parasites and bacteria that infested most wild foods. Trichinosis from wild boar, toxoplasmosis from deer, dozens of worm species that used humans as hosts. Fire ended these invisible threats. It broke down toxins that made many plants poisonous when raw. Taro root contains calcium oxalate crystals that cause severe mouth pain raw, but become harmless when cooked. Cassava has cyanide compounds that cooking neutralizes. Our ancestors discovered they could eat things that would have killed them uncooked. They learned chemical processes we now understand scientifically. Soaking acorns in water leaches out bitter tannins. The water turns brown as toxins dissolve. After multiple soakings, the nuts become edible and nutritious. Some groups learned to add wood ash to corn, creating what Mexicans call nixtamalization. This process releases niacin, preventing pellagra. They didn't know the chemistry, but they knew the results. People who ate treated corn stayed healthy. They developed sophisticated cooking methods. Pit roasting, where food wrapped in leaves cooked underground for hours. The steady heat broke down tough fibers and complex proteins. Stone boiling, dropping hot rocks into hide bags filled with water and food. This gentle cooking preserved nutrients that direct fire destroyed. Steam pits using hot stones and seaweed. Clay baking that sealed in moisture. Each technique unlocked different nutrients from different foods. Fire also enabled food combinations impossible before. Meat and plant foods cooked together created complete proteins. Bone broths extracted minerals into bioavailable forms. Fermentation became possible with controlled temperatures. They learned that some foods became more nutritious when cooked together. Fat-soluble vitamins in plants became available when cooked with animal fats. This wasn't conscious nutrition science, but accumulated wisdom over thousands of generations. When early humans reached coastlines 100,000 years ago, they discovered Earth's most reliable food source. The ocean never had a bad harvest. Droughts didn't affect it. Ice ages made it cold but still productive. Twice a day, the tide delivered fresh food directly to shore. No hunting required, no dangerous confrontations with predators. Just patient gathering at the right times. Tide pools were like prehistoric grocery stores, always restocked twice daily. Never empty, never seasonal. Each pool was a micro-ecosystem packed with calories. Mussels clustered on rocks in beds so thick you could gather pounds in minutes. Limpets and periwinkles clung to surfaces, easily pried off with simple tools. Sea urchins hid in crevices, their gonads a delicacy rich in iodine. Crabs scuttled in shallow water, easy to trap. Octopi sheltered in rock caves, betrayed by empty shells outside their dens. Shellfish don't run away, they don't fight back. You just need to know when and where to look. Low tide revealed thousands of calories just waiting to be collected. Spring tides during new and full moons exposed areas usually underwater. The lowest tides came at dawn and dusk, perfect for gathering. Our ancestors learned these rhythms like their lives depended on it because they did. Shell middens in South Africa show continuous occupation for 60,000 years. These aren't just trash heaps. They're libraries of information about human adaptation. The same families returned to the same beaches for 2,000 generations. Layers of shells tell stories of climate change, population growth, and technological advancement. Lower layers show simple gathering. Upper layers reveal sophisticated processing techniques and selective harvesting. They knew every rock pool, every mussel bed. Mental maps passed down through generations marked productive spots. They understood that over-harvesting one area meant starvation later, so they rotated gathering grounds. They timed their gathering with the tides and seasons. Spring brought spawning runs of fish into shallow water. Summer meant abundant seaweed. Fall delivered migrating species. Winter storms washed up deep water creatures. This wasn't random beachcombing. It was systematic resource management that required deep ecological knowledge. They learned to read the ocean like a book. Red tides meant avoid shellfish or risk paralytic poisoning. Certain seaweeds indicated safe eating areas. Bioluminescence warned of toxic dinoflagellates. They discovered that some shellfish were toxic in summer, but safe in winter. Filter feeders like mussels concentrated algal toxins during warm months. Predatory snails remained safe year-round. Coastal peoples developed technologies specific to marine resources. Specialized tools for prying shellfish off rocks. Bone hooks for fishing. Woven nets from plant fibers. Harpoons for spearing larger prey. The ocean provided materials too. Shells became cutting tools. Fish bones turned into needles. Seaweed yielded salt through burning. Every resource had multiple uses. The nutritional advantages were dramatic. Shellfish provided complete proteins with all essential amino acids. Seaweed offered iodine for thyroid function, crucial for brain development. Fish delivered vitamin D, especially important in higher latitudes. Omega-3 fatty acids from marine sources supported larger brain growth. Coastal peoples developed larger brains and more complex tools than inland groups. The reliable food source allowed population growth and cultural development. The ultimate test of human dietary adaptation came in the Arctic Circle. Here, plants don't exist for 8 months of the year. Temperatures drop to -60. Darkness lasts months. How do you survive on 100% animal products? The answer required completely reimagining human nutrition. Everything we think we know about balanced diets had to be abandoned. Fat became more important than protein. In moderate climates, humans can survive on lean meat supplemented with plants. In the Arctic, lean meat causes rabid starvation, protein poisoning that kills within weeks. The body can only process so much protein without fat. Excess protein overloads the liver and kidneys. Arctic peoples learned this through deadly trial and error. Blubber wasn't a side dish, it was the main course. Seal blubber is 90% fat, perfect for Arctic survival. Without plant carbohydrates, the body burns fat for energy through ketosis. This metabolic state, trendy now, was mandatory then. But ketosis requires specific adaptations. Arctic peoples developed enlarged livers to process massive fat intake. Their gallbladders produced more bile. Their intestines hosted different bacteria specialized for breaking down animal products. These weren't lifestyle choices. They were evolutionary adaptations. Arctic peoples developed specific genetic mutations to process massive amounts of fat. The CPT1A gene mutation, found in 68% of Inuit populations, allows cells to burn fat more efficiently. Their livers produce 3 times more bile than average humans. They can digest amounts of blubber that would make others violently ill. These mutations happened recently in evolutionary terms, within the last 20,000 years. Evolution in real time, driven by dietary pressure, but they needed more than just calories. Without plants, where do you get vitamin C? Scurvy killed European Arctic explorers who relied on preserved foods. Native peoples never got scurvy. The answer? Raw organ meat. Fresh seal liver contains enough vitamin C to prevent scurvy, but it must be eaten raw. Cooking destroys vitamin C. Whale skin, called muktuk, eaten raw and fresh, provides even more. The outer skin contains vitamin C comparable to oranges. They drank fresh blood as a warm beverage, getting iron and salt. Seal blood, drunk immediately after killing, provided warmth and nutrients. The iron content prevented anemia common in other populations. Blood also contained glucose from the animal's last meal, providing quick energy. Some groups fermented blood with stomach contents, creating a nutrient-rich beverage that lasted weeks. They ate fermented fish heads, which sounds disgusting, but provided crucial B vitamins. The fermentation process created B12, usually only found in animal products. It also produced vitamin K2 for bone health. The controlled rot broke down proteins into amino acids, making them more digestible. What smelled like death to outsiders smelled like survival to Arctic peoples. They ground bones into powder for calcium. Without dairy, bones were the only calcium source. They dry bones over fires, then grind them with stones. The powder was mixed into other foods or eaten directly. They even ate the soft bones of fish whole. Children chewed on bone fragments like candy, building strong teeth and bones despite no plant foods. Every part of every animal had a purpose. Eyes for vitamin A, preventing night blindness during dark months. Brain for omega-3s, maintaining cognitive function. Stomach contents of caribou for partially digested plants, the only vegetable matter available. Even intestines were valuable, containing beneficial bacteria and pre-digested nutrients. Nothing was too gross if it meant survival. Today's keto diet is a pale imitation of humanity's most extreme survival adaptation. Modern dieters complain about giving up bread while eating varied meats and vegetables. Our ancestors lived entire lives without ever seeing a plant. They didn't just survive, they thrived. Built complex cultures with sophisticated art and oral traditions. Raised healthy children who grew into strong adults. Lived into old age, teaching survival skills to grandchildren. All on a diet that would horrify modern nutritionists. Somewhere in prehistoric Africa, someone made a mistake that changed everything. A piece of meat forgotten in a skin bag during a long journey. When found weeks later, it should have been deadly. The heat, the time, the bacteria, everything pointed to lethal food poisoning. But desperation drives innovation. Someone was hungry enough to try it anyway. Instead of dying, they discovered humanity's first preserved food. The meat hadn't rotted in the normal way. It had fermented. Good bacteria had won the battle against bad bacteria, creating an acidic environment where pathogens couldn't survive. The lactic acid produced by fermentation dropped the pH below 4.5, too acidic for botulism, salmonella, or other deadly bacteria. This accidental discovery revolutionized human survival. Fermented foods could last months without refrigeration. They were often safer than fresh meat, which could harbor parasites. The fermentation process actually increased certain nutrients. B vitamins multiplied as bacteria produced them. Vitamin K2, crucial for bone health, appeared in fermented foods but not fresh. Proteins broke down into amino acids, becoming more digestible. The bacteria themselves became food, providing additional protein and beneficial microbes for gut health. Plus, fermented foods developed complex flavors, prehistoric umami that made survival foods actually taste good. The glutamates produced by fermentation triggered the same taste receptors as modern MSG. Every culture on Earth independently discovered fermentation. This wasn't cultural exchange. This was convergent evolution of human knowledge. Korean kimchi, German sauerkraut, African biltong, Japanese natto, all echoes of this ancient survival technology. The fact that every culture found fermentation proves its fundamental importance. Our ancestors fermented everything they could. Fish buried in sand until it liquefied into garum. Milk left in stomach bags until it became cheese. Plants packed in salt water until they turned sour. These weren't delicacies. They were survival necessities. The chemistry is remarkably consistent across cultures. Salt or acid prevents bad bacteria. Good bacteria produce lactic acid. This acid preserves the food and adds beneficial probiotics. Temperature control encourages good bacteria while discouraging bad. Time allows full fermentation without overrotting. Our gut microbiome evolved alongside these fermented foods. We literally need these bacteria for proper digestion. They help break down nutrients, produce vitamins, and protect against pathogens. Different regions develop different fermentation techniques based on local resources. Coastal peoples fermented fish and seaweed. Inland groups focused on meat and vegetables. Dairy cultures created dozens of cheese varieties. Each technique matched local climate and available materials. Hot climates needed more salt. Cold climates could use slower fermentation. Humid areas required different methods than dry regions. Modern sterile diets leave our guts unprepared for the real world. We've eliminated the bacteria that co-evolved with us for millions of years. Autoimmune diseases, allergies, and digestive problems plague populations that abandon traditional fermented foods. Our ancestors had more diverse gut bacteria from eating fermented foods daily. This diversity protected them from pathogens and helped extract maximum nutrition from limited food sources. As you sit reading this, your entire body bears the marks of ancestral survival. Your digestive system evolved to handle both feast and famine. Your liver can switch between metabolizing plants and animals. Your taste preferences, seemingly personal choices, are actually genetic programming. You crave fat and salt because your ancestors who didn't crave them died before reproducing. Every food preference has an evolutionary story. You have a sweet tooth because fruit meant survival. In nature, sweet usually means safe and calorie-dense. Bitter often means poison. Sour might mean fermented and safe, or spoiled and dangerous. Your ability to distinguish these tastes kept your lineage alive. Your disgust at rotten smells protected your ancestors from food poisoning. The gag reflex that makes you recoil from certain textures saved countless lives. These aren't learned behaviors. They're hardwired survival mechanisms. We carry genetic adaptations from every food crisis our ancestors survived. Lactose tolerance appeared only 10,000 years ago in cattle herding populations. Some humans evolved to digest milk sugar into adulthood, gaining access to a new food source. Efficient starch processing genes multiplied in agricultural populations. People whose ancestors farmed grains have more copies of amylase genes for breaking down starches. Alcohol tolerance genes spread in populations that fermented fruit. Each gene tells a story of starvation and adaptation. Your metabolism shifts based on ancestral patterns. Descendants of Arctic peoples process fats differently than those from equatorial regions. People with agricultural ancestry handle carbohydrates better than those from hunter-gatherer lineages. These aren't racist categories, but regional adaptations to available foods. Your body is a living record of what kept humans alive in your ancestral environment. Some adaptations cause problems in modern contexts. Genes that helped store fat during famines now contribute to obesity when food is plentiful. Salt retention that prevented dehydration now causes hypertension. The thrifty genes that saved our ancestors kill their descendants. We're running Ice Age software in a Space Age world. In our sanitized food system, we've lost connection to survival skills that kept humanity alive for millions of years. We waste 40% of food produced while our ancestors used every calorie. We're disgusted by organ meats packed with more nutrition than muscle meat. We take expensive supplements instead of eating whole foods that provide nutrients in natural balance. Our pickiness would seem insane to anyone who faced real starvation. But these skills aren't truly lost, just forgotten. Indigenous peoples worldwide maintain this knowledge. Urban foragers rediscover edible plants in cities. Homesteaders relearn fermentation and preservation. The knowledge exists, waiting for those who seek it. Climate change and supply chain disruptions might make these skills relevant again. What seems like paranoid prepping might become a practical necessity. The next time you throw away expired food, remember, your ancestors would have called that breakfast. Every weird food combination that grosses you out kept someone alive. Every cultural delicacy that seems disgusting represents successful adaptation to local conditions. Every survival technique that sounds extreme saved your bloodline from extinction. You exist because someone ate something revolting and lived to reproduce. That's the most successful diet in human history.